Hello, Mr. Spowert. Thanks for joining me, mate. Just give it a second for a couple of people to log on and then I'll continue to talk. Just do a quick mic check and everything. I've got a new layout running for me today, so I just need to make sure everything's running okay. I'll probably be turning the volume up on the TV because you might not be able to hear it too well, but we shall see. How's it going, Woody? Hello, Aaron, mate. Nice to see you back on Facebook. You know what? I love NBA Jam. I absolutely fucking love NBA Jam. Right, we're going to be talking about a few things. Just give me a second. Just got to grab a few little bits, and I'll be right with you. And I'm in appropriate attire for this video. Right, just set up, guys. 2 seconds. Right, I've got my mic back. You have bad memories of it. Well, NBA Jam. NBA Jam's a superb game. If you loved your basketball like I did back in the day, you definitely loved NBA Jam. It was the Jordan era, you know what I mean? And if you haven't checked it out yet and you do have got a passing interest in it, make sure you watch The Last Dance on Netflix, about the best era of basketball there ever was. The time I was into it at my highest. Right, alright guys, hello, good evening. Going to be a bit less, try and be a bit more interactive with you directly on this one, because obviously I'm not talking to anybody else, it's just going to be me to you. I might need to adjust the volume as we go, so just tell me if it's too quiet or anything. It's intentionally quiet at the moment because I'm going to be obviously trying to talk to you about the system and everything. So for this hands-on anyway, today we're going to be talking about the Atari Jaguar. Now this system, of course, is Atari's swan song. It was the last console released by them. It came out at a time that was, it was the market was being heavily contested by, the 16-bit systems at the time, the SNES and the Mega Drive, and this thing unfortunately tried to go up directly against the SNES and the Mega Drive, and it failed epically. I've got a bit of a history with the system, which I'm going to explain to you as we go along. But I've been trying to do this video now for going on 18 months altogether because I've had that many problems with it. The system itself, I've had a couple of these now. This is now my third console. If anybody knows Atari as well, they'll know that the actual construction quality of most Atari systems is very, very questionable, and I mean very questionable. It's to the point where it's comical, and unfortunately, this system especially. I've had a few now, and for a system that came out at a time where build qualities were improving and things like that, the build quality of this is shoddy, to be quite honest. I've got a few things for this. I originally bought this system probably back in 2013, 14, somewhere around there. And I managed to buy a system for I think I paid about £100 for it, which is the going rate at the time. Up until a couple of years ago, you could actually buy the system new old stock. I think Game cleared out their inventory in the UK, and up until a couple of years ago, I think as recent as 2012, a lot of people bought this system brand new as old stock. So but then in recent years, with obviously the collecting market kind of increasing, everything has just gone crazy. And when I had I had two at one point because I got donated one kindly by Tom Charnock, and his had been 60 hertz modded, and unfortunately, that one broke because the pins in the cart slot are so close together in pitch and so fragile they break easily if you insert a cartridge wrong. Not to mention the fact that it doesn't have a cartridge protector on the slot like a lot of consoles do. It's not great really. It doesn't bode well for the system. But yeah, then I had another one and that one broke. So I'm on my third one now, And I waited a little while. I was trying to get one cheap because I had all the accessories and stuff for it. I didn't need a complete system, but finding one now just on its own is difficult to do. And I had a few people saying, "Oh, we'll sell you one for 120, 130," and I was like, I might as well just wait and get a boxed one, and then when if I get the other one fixed, I can sell it on. So that's what I've done. And I actually bought this one just last week for £175, I think it was, complete in box. The box isn't in the greatest condition, but it is complete in box with Cybermorph, the like the cardboard inserts, the controller, and everything like that. So I've just taken the console out, added it to my accessories, and off we go. Yeah, someone just mentioned there the controller. Thanks, Paul. The controller on these, in case you've never seen it, is a curious beast. Obviously, it's this kind of arrangement. Now, this is very much a throwback to the older days of consoles. Some of the early systems had like a numerical pad on there as a dish to serve as additional buttons. I'm not quite sure why they ever did it that way. That they felt like you didn't need plenty of action buttons, but you needed these auxiliary buttons for games that were incredibly simple. But by this era, the Mega Drive had 3 buttons as standard. Didn't have any of this nonsense. The SNES had moved up to 6 buttons to account for fighting games, and this just felt like a massive step back. It's bulky. It's not super comfortable to hold. It feels okay when you first grip it. When you're playing the games, the angle of the D-pad for the thumb just feels wrong. There's the best way to put it. And it's quite a firm D-pad as well, so it's tricky to press. I couldn't imagine trying to do Street Fighter style moves on this D-pad. It wouldn't be great. The best thing I can say about this pad, if I just back up the camera, is that it can do this. You can stand it up on a table. That's probably the best thing I've got to say about the Atari Jaguar controller. Now, I know there's a lot of Atari fans out there. I'm not doing this video to slag off Atari. I've got a love for all systems. I've been saying that for many years. And, there's systems and games I'm experiencing now I never got to experience before. And so I'm now trying to indulge in them fully. But the Jaguar has always been a tricky one because the market has gone the way it has, and because it's a less loved system. It's not been that easy to access all the games you need to. It doesn't even emulate that well. There's still some games that don't emulate properly, even on the best Atari Jaguar emulators, because there's only a couple in existence. So I'll show you what I have got for it. So, I've got a couple of games, obviously. One of them is probably the best game on the system, my personal favourite. And if you've never played it before, you should play Tempest 2000. And I'm not talking about any of the other ports, only the Jaguar port. I would not play this game on any other system. Jeff Minter himself said that when they ported this to the PlayStation, and I think the other one was the Saturn, was it? They got the AI of the droid wrong, and a few of the things, the sound effects weren't right, and it's just not comparable to this one. And this one has got inbuilt spinner support, even though they never released an official spinner controller. You can actually make your own, and if you hold a certain key combination on startup, you can force it to start in rotary mode. I've actually now sold this because I'll come on to where I'm going with that. But got a couple of other games at the moment. Cybermorph, most people have. It was the packing game for many years, so most people had that. Kasumi Ninja is a very average fighting game. Well, actually quite a terrible fighting game, but it's good for a laugh if you like ridiculous gore and stupid death moves. But I have got some of the better games for the system, which I'm just going to pull out now, if you don't mind me. This one, not particularly high value, but I always enjoyed the game, is Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. This game, of course, was available on 16-bit platforms at the time, and was probably better on those, to be fair, but it's still pretty good on here. But this isn't a particular high-value game. I picked that up at some kind of car boot, I think it was. But two of the better games for the system, obviously I've just showed Tempest 2000 of these, and anybody who's a fan of PC gaming, console game, whatever, will know, obviously, these came from id Software, and even though the Doom is the one that's most renowned on this system, it is a fantastic port. It doesn't have any music, unfortunately, but it is a fantastic port, purely because of the restrictions of the horrible controller. The actual better game to play is Wolfenstein. Wolfenstein 3D plays brilliantly on here, and even though it's a lot more basic than Doom, it just seems to handle so much better, and it seems to run so much better. So the games themselves, in case you didn't know, are region free. I don't know if, well, they're not actually region free. There's no region lock to speak of, and you can easily modify the system for 60 Hz. Even though most of the development for this system was done in the UK, and even though obviously the target audience was probably America, a lot of games are optimized for 50 Hz, but playing them at 60 Hz does make them a much better experience, as you would expect. Um, yeah, so if you buy a game here, you buy a game from abroad, they're all going to work on pretty much whatever system you've got. I think there's one or two exceptions there that's not the case, but most of them do. I only found that out to myself very recently because I'm now selling a couple of these games, but I didn't know that it didn't have a full region lock. It also means when it comes to using a flash drive, it makes it very simple to set up because you don't need loads of different regions. Just going to have a quick look at your comments before I carry on, guys, because there's a lot of chat going on. Yeah, need the spinner controller. I will be getting a spinner controller for this in the future. Make no mistake about that. Doom and Wolfenstein 3D are done very well on the Jag. Yeah, they are done very well on this system. I like it. It's never going to beat the PC versions, obviously, but they are great games. And John Carmack coded the Jaguar, Doom and Wolfenstein 3D. Yeah, I understand that. He only worked on a couple of the systems, from what I understand. I think was one of them the 32X and the other one was a Jaguar. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense as to why they turned out pretty good on here. Unfortunately, Jim Baggers did a superior port apparently for the Saturn back in the day, and it was nerfed at the request of John Carmack because they managed to make it perform better than the PC somehow. And unfortunately, that version has been lost to time because obviously when all the copyrights and everything went ahead, and the game was released, any production work had to go with it. So obviously that version, that perfect version, Saturn version of Doom that Jim worked on is now lost to the sands of time, unfortunately. And Jim did actually pull up with John Romero at Revival a few years ago about that and asked the question why, and John wasn't fully in the picture as to why, but he had an understanding as to what kind of transpired, and did say it was down to John Carmack, I think. Someone just asked him, have I still got my broken Jaguar? Yes, I have, Matt. The broken Jaguar, it's got a messed up cart slot. So that cart slot, that one is going to be sent off. Mark Payne is going to be fixing that for one of his videos in the upcoming. He asked if he could have that over because he said it'd make an interesting project for a video. So he's going to be doing the repair work on that and replacing the cartridge slot. But I've got to wait for a new cartridge slot to arrive from America, which is going to be about 4 or 5 weeks yet. So that's going to be some time off. But yeah, it will be fixed and it will be put back into service. And this one will also be modified at the same time to have a 60 Hz switch on it. Xenon 2 come out on the Jag. I'll go into all that in a minute, Don. You'll see what I'm talking about with that. You should be working, but you're hiding. It's a video worth checking out, guys, if you've never seen the system. Our Mark's fixing yours, so brilliant stuff. Right, so I'll crack on with the system itself then. There's a few other peripherals I've got for the system. The system did get a 6-button control pad at one point, the Pro controller, but anybody who collects will know that obtaining one is not an easy task. If you want to buy one box now, you're looking about £200 for the 6-button controller. And the sad thing is, there's only about 2 games you can really use it on that are of any use. I think a couple of the Jaguar CD games use it. I don't have the Jaguar CD, so I've got no way of testing that. But what I did do is somebody recently managed to make some proper reproductions of it. And they were doing limited runs of them, and thankfully I managed to get a pair. Now the one I actually gifted over to my friend Aaron Davis, so he's got the other one of these. If you're still watching, mate, it'd be cool. These were still kind of pricey, but nowhere near as pricey as the second-hand original ones. They've got a slightly better D-pad, slightly more responsive buttons. The rounder buttons feel better anyway. And it's really, really quality, this is. I'm glad I've got it. The only problem is, and this is probably down to the Jaguar itself, you're going to see when I show you the end of this. You might just about be able to make in there a bent pin. Now what it is, the pitch of these pins is made according to spec, but because of the way the pins work inside the cartridge slots on the front of the system, over time they wear, and when you plug these in and out, most of the original controllers have worn alongside them. These brand new ones have got no wear or no bedding in at all. And what's happened is a couple of times I've plugged this in and I've bent the pins as I've done it, and I did it again today. So I'm not going to be showing you this controller today, unfortunately, but I have got a pair. I will straighten them out. If I'm very careful, I can insert it properly. Aaron Davis has got the other one, and what I do want to show you once lockdown is over is I want to show you Doom on Link Up, because the Jaguar did have a couple of Link Up games. Now, another expensive peripheral for this system is the Jag Link. To buy one of those, it's hard to get hold of and it's kind of expensive, but thankfully, the way it is, it's got like a block adapter on the end, looks a bit like that, and then on the back, it's got like a Cat5 network cable adapter. So basically, you plug in a network cable adapter, and then you plug in the Jag Link block to either end of the Jaguars, and you can play games on Link. There's a few games that use it. Doom is one of them. You can play death matches on it. There's also Air Cars, which I believe is an 8-player Link, but I think you need a hub to do that. But like I say, getting hold of a Jag Link is difficult. And from what I've heard, it's a little bit flaky. It doesn't transfer the data as fast as it actually needs to. So it's not ideal. But thankfully, somebody is making reproductions. The actual device itself is pretty much just a cable converter. So all you need is a converter block to plug into the Jaguar, and then you can just use standard cables in order to do the transfer. And so what people have done is that they've basically created this it's like a network crossover cable, which has got modified blocks on the end, because it is a proprietary proprietary edge connector, and you can get some that are close to it. But if you can see, there's one pin missing, because the Jaguar only uses 6 pins, 12 pins, whereas the standards only came in 7. So, but someone has made these up anyway. So once lockdown's over and I've got my friend Aaron round here, we're going to try and link up the two systems. We're probably going to do it at an event as well, and we're going to do some Jaguar Doom link up, which I think will be good because not many people have got to experience that. So yeah, that is the all the stuff I got for mine. However, a lot of it has become redundant, and that is because just a couple of weeks ago, something started to arrive on our doorsteps, and that thing is this, the Jaguar Game Drive. Now, what this is, obviously, it's the first EverDrive-like system that has been made for the console. Originally, there was a drive made, which is like a flash cart, a single game flash cart, excuse me. Yeah, it's a single game flash cart called the Skunk Board. I think you could run 2 games on there at any one time. Sometimes you had to modify games to actually work on there. It wasn't ideal, but it's all the communities had for many, many years. Now, obviously, times moved on, and people were saying now, with so many consoles having their own flash solutions, listen, the Jaguar doesn't have one. It desperately, desperately needs one. And so Retro HQ, a guy called Saint, who's been responsible for some fantastic EverDrive-like solutions for consoles that didn't yet have them. Outside of Crix, who's the main, obviously, producer of the EverDrive that everybody knows and loves, Retro HQ Saint has been working on some of the best ones. And by best, I mean they're the closest in functionality to typical EverDrives. But he adds a lot more features to them. He tries to add a few little tricks that makes them a bit more user friendly, and he tries to improve the presentation somewhat. Not only that, but he's tightly controlling the manufacture of them, so to make sure that the products can A, meet demand, and B, are of suitable quality. They're not going to fall apart or be easily cloned. Now, I've spoke to Saint a few times, and this thing's been in development for about, I think, close to 3 years now. It was only announced about 2 years ago, and I put myself on the pre-order list for it. I think it was would have been about last August, I think it was, and that was because they finally announced he was going to get them ready. Now, when I spoke to him, because there hadn't been an update for a while, he said that it was going to be a problem because he doesn't want to fall into the trap that other flash drive manufacturers do, and that is obviously not being able to meet demand, not being able to manufacture them, and not being able to, you know, not being able to answer the demand that people are finally going to want for these systems because how long has it been in production? And thankfully, he had the foresight to call on some friends, call on some help, and with the help of Atari Age, a bunch of guys I'm not overly familiar with myself, but I've had a lot more to do with them in recent months, say, let's say we speak. Um, but he's had a lot more to do with them, and I think he's outsourced the manufacture of these devices now, and he's made sure that they can be produced regularly, produced at high quality. And rather than just using a standard Jaguar cartridge shell, you'll notice this one is completely square. It hasn't got a handle on the top, but it has got a micro SD card slot on the top there. There's a little white spot above the Jaguar eye there. That's actually where a red LED hides, which tells you what it's doing when it's like flashing the drive. And the actual shell itself, if we go close up, isn't a 3D print like most people who don't use original cartridge shells. They'll use 3D prints rather than any kind of injection molding. This is this high density, rather heavyweight style stuff. If you ever saw the Spectrum Next handheld prototype at any of the revival events, it's made of exactly the same stuff as that. So it's incredibly heavy duty, incredibly hard wearing, and it's not going to fall apart. I've had some original leather drives, and they are a little bit flaky. They're the best you can get, and yet they're still a bit flaky. This thing is built really well. I paid £140 for this. That isn't cheap by a long shot. But going with the prices of current EverDrives, the way they're evolving now and they're putting bigger FPGA chips and things inside, it is about right. And the reason it costs so much is because this thing at the moment will basically run standard Jaguar ROMs. It will run ports. It will run certain other hacks and betas and things like that. But the intention is that it will eventually run Jaguar CD games. Now, the Jaguar CD console, for anyone who's not familiar, it's rare as rocking horse shit for one. When you do get hold of one, they aren't very well built, as you would expect. They have broken lids, broken drives. They don't make proper contact with the pins inside the Jaguar. They literally just kind of slot into the slot. And you get a lot of red screen problems with them. There was only about 2 or 3 games made for it. Don't quote me on that number, but there weren't many. And even though the homebrew community has been quite active, it's quite expensive piece of kit for 1 or 2 games. The last we saw, actually, at Revival, the main Revival last year, there was a Jaguar CD on the back of one of the stands. I think it was at £700. And I like my rare systems, but even I couldn't justify that. And that is about the going rate online. The price of the consoles themselves has gone up purely because of supply and demand. Less people have got them working these days. More people want to try them out, and they've gone from £100 to, like I say, £200 to £300 boxed. So yeah, it's terrible. And as Woody rightly says there, the Jaguar CD does look like a toilet seat. You never know whether to put a CD or take a shit in it. Yeah, you're right, completely right. I'm going to come on to that in a sec, Matt. I just saw your point there. I'll mention that as I'm going through the games. But yeah, so I pre-ordered this at £140. When you consider that it will eventually, I mean, it is already doing it in the prototype stage. Saint has actually demonstrated that the CD games will run through this, but it needs to optimize the code, and you have to use a proprietary disk. You have to format the disk format to work with the Jaguar GD drive. He's working on all that, and he will get that done. And when he does, he will release a firmware update which will allow it to work. So for £140, you're getting an EverDrive, and much like the SSDS3 for the PC Engine, you're actually emulating the entire CD hardware using this. So that's why it's such a good buy. Like I say, availability at the moment is going to be scarce because, as with all of Saint's products, there is a bit of a waiting list involved, purely because he wanted to sort out new production for a lot of his systems. And he's also put in some copy protection which stops them being easily cloned. He assures me that the reason he's done that is because he just wants to quality control. He's not doing it to be selfish like some of the other guys have, who've done it and then never produced enough to keep the price high. He's wanted to research and keep the price low and control the flow of these things, so he knows that all the ones out there all work equally. And eventually this will have all the updates, and yours will be safe as long as you've got an official one. And yeah, he will support everything properly, and he will be able to meet demand. Now he's got the help of Atari Age. In fact, on the firmware pages and places like that, it does credit some of the guys from Atari Age. So good community over there who've helped out a lot. In the last couple of days, I've actually sought a bit of help on there myself for helping getting this EverDrive set up, which I'll explain now. So those guys over there have been really, really helpful, and they're willing to help you get yours set up. So, you know, more people can be out there using them so they can troubleshoot and release patches and things like that. There's already been one firmware update because they discovered a bug in Doom, whereby when you launch it on stage, because you can select what stage you start, and I think if you launch on stage 2, the game will crash randomly. No other stage, just stage 2. They've now released a patch which has fixed that, so that sorted that out. So they're on the ball. If you order one now, you're probably going to be waiting a while to get one. You have to go back on a waiting list. That's purely because they had so many pre-orders. They need to answer the pre-orders before they start taking regular orders and producing them, you know, on a production line, if you know what I mean. They've got a lot ready, but they just need to make a lot more now. And when they do, you'll be able to buy them. I think the going price at the moment, you have to go to Atari Age to order them, and I think it's $180 at the moment. So whatever that is on the exchange rate, that's what you're looking at. I think it was £140 plus about £3 for postage. But yeah, I think it did come from America minded, so obviously that's something to bear in mind. I had to wait close to a year for mine. You're probably waiting about 6 months at the going rate, so if you order one now, you might get one for Christmas. Anyway, see what happens. So the device itself, anyway, I've waffled on enough. Like I say, the Jaguar is a peculiar beast. It's got a complex chip arrangement in there, which I believe makes programming for it kind of problematic. It hasn't got all the features of other systems. It's got RF as its standard connection. I'm actually using a AV breakout cable here. I haven't got it going through RGB SCAR, but it's better, much better than RF. And that's just going into the yellow, white, and red RCAs on the side of the console there. And then on the back, there's also an expansion port. Sorry, 2 expansion ports. My bad. Sorry about that, guys. I just clicked the wrong thing on my phone. There we go. And yeah, it's quite a basic console, but as far as running the games goes, it's quite a complex beast to write for, which I believe is one of its problems when people were making games for it. So the console itself only ever got, I believe it was 50 or so dedicated games for it. I don't think there were ever anything, and there was ever anything more than that released. Some games that were only released as prototypes and demos later got put into the hands of more experienced coders who then released them with permission into the 2000s. I think the last game released for the system that was originally written for it back in the day, I think was it Brutal Sports Football? It may have been. I'm just going to go down. One of them will say 2005. No, it's not Brutal Sports Football. One of the games anyway on there. Yeah, it didn't come out till 2005, so that's an indication of, you know, this kind of console's patchy history. The games that came out for it, there were some good games for it. It's generally renowned as having quite bad games, but the games that were released and were good, but often found on other consoles, and they weren't a leap above on this. In part of the discussion we talked about the other day in my Retro Gaming Room 101, back in the day, a company would develop a game, and with the intention of making the most money, they would want to release it on as many systems as possible. So what they would do is they would tend to develop a game aiming to a standard kind of chipset, and then tweak it in order to release it on certain consoles. But anyway, we're going through the games, and we're going to take a look at a couple of them now. The ones I've talked about so far, like I say, tend to be ports of equal 16-bit platform games. It had some original games of its own, using their own intellectual properties, things like Missile Command, and I'm trying to think of some other examples. There ain't too many, to be honest. But it had mostly had ports of other 16-bit platform games. and move 60 there. Pitfall, that was on several of the 16-bit platforms at the time. Just trying to see what else there was. Raiden, nothing too special there. Rayman, of course, that was a 32-bit platform game, but again, there's nothing too complex going on there, so you can see how that happened. So we're just going to show a couple of those just to show you what a typical game looks like, and I'm going to show you my favourite game on here, of course, which is the entire reason I own a Jaguar at all. If it wasn't for this game, I wouldn't even bother with the Jaguar whatsoever. You can probably tell that from what I've been talking about so far. So we just hit the B button and the game loads up. And you now get the Jaguar splash screen. Usually when you first turn the console on, that's when you see the Jaguar splash screen. And this is when you either get a loading screen or the red screen of death, which is a bad connection error generally speaking. And you should just about be able to hear this. I'm going to crank the sound up a bit. It is, yeah, in my opinion, it's the only reason to own a Jag. Anything but Cybermorph, yeah. Cybermorph sucks ass. I'm going to come on to all the games, guys, don't worry, so I'm going to cover them all. For just people who haven't seen it before, I want to show the excellence that is Tempest 2000. The music's fucking awesome. Can you hear that okay? Just give me a shout if you want me to rack it up a bit. I love this game. The arcade original was always a good one for me. Once you get used to a rotary controller, a spinner, it's great, but you know, the Jaguar never had one, but like I say, thankfully you can build your own using a few bits and bobs by modifying the original controller. And I've played this with a spinner and it plays brilliantly. You can actually put it into a proper spinner mode so it controls properly with a spinner. Not exactly a hard game, you can get quite far on this without needing to be too good. The AI droid that you see there helping me, that was a part that Jeff Minter said didn't control properly on the ports that they made for PlayStation. And why the Jaguar, one of the main reasons the Jaguar version is so much better. Okay. You should be able to hear me okay. I could always turn the mic up a touch. I'll turn this up a bit. Should be able to hear a little bit better now at least. My mic volume is up full, so it should be okay. Maybe it's just the way I've got my in this room, I don't know. But yeah, anyway, that's Tempest 2000. So, bad thing about the Jaguar not having a reset switch, you do have to power it down every time. So you can see there, when the cartridge actually loads up the Jag SD, you actually get a loading screen straight into this rather than the Jaguar splash screen. Dave, yeah, cheers for your help, Dave, by the way, on getting all this sorted out. It's taken a lot of help from guys on Atari age to get it all fully up and running the way I want to, but I've got there in the end. So yeah, Alien vs Predator. I've got to fire that up because I know that's a lot of people's favourite. What is quite cool about the Jag SD is obviously you can see here at the side of the screen, you can actually add what's called MRQ files, and they give you the data that you see there at the bottom of the screen. They also give you box art and a screenshot. So, you know, unlike a normal EverDrive, you've actually got something graphical to look at, which is a lot nicer. I can understand why they don't do it with some of the lower power systems, like the, you know, some of the portables or the 8 bits, but with the like the 32 and 64 bits, even the 16 bits, they could do this with. They just choose not to, and I really like that feature of the Jag SD. They do something very similar with this interface on the Neo Geo Pocket. It was called the Neo. Oh, it's called the Neo Drive, I think it's called now. But yeah, I'm going to fire up Alien vs Predator anyway. This just seems to be everyone's favourite. I'm not much cop at it, I'll be honest. But and it's been a long time since I played it. I probably won't be able to remember the controls, but let's fire it up anyway. It does support all size ROMs, doesn't matter how small or large they are. And thankfully this cartridge is making good connections, so we shouldn't be getting that red screen on anything really. I apologise if the screen looks a bit washed out. I am recording this filming an LCD screen, so the big break just actually was making sure that my camera was working. And this is another good example of a game on here. The best character to be, I mean, it does make some interesting gameplay being the alien or the predator, but by far the best character to be is the Colonial Marine, because obviously you've got access to all the weapons and everything. This is more of like a first-person shooter. The other modes are more like stealth games, if you know what I mean. And you play as Lance Lewis, so not Hicks or anyone from the films. One thing always frustrated me slightly, quite a few Jaguar games say loading. You wouldn't expect to see loading frames or loading times on console games. There we go. What on earth got a hold of this guy? So I've got my shotgun. You do have a little scanner at the side which tells you if the aliens are coming to be detected. Yeah, the aliens are the main enemy in this. Whether you're the Colonial Marine or whether you're the Predator, the aliens are the bad guys. Like I say, it's been a long time since I played it. I can't remember where the hell I need to go. But yeah, I mean, it's along at a fair old pace anyway. Playing this on 60 Hz is a lot better, I will admit. 60 Hz is does make this chug along a lot faster, so definitely worth doing. I forgot the first couple of levels are not actually too much action, but yeah, that is Alien versus Predator anyway. Oh, thanks for joining us, Gareth. Yes, mate. When I originally placed the order, I think it was actually done through a pre-order waiting post that was made on Atari Age that linked back to the Retro HQ website. But yeah, if you go to Atari Age and search for, it's no longer called the Jag SD. It was originally called the Jag SD. It's now called the Jaguar Game Drive, so the Jaguar GD. So you'll need to search for that, and it'll take you to the first post, and you can apply there and put yourself on the waiting list for the next batch. So yeah, those are a couple of exclusive games for the system, and two of the best. Another one, of course, is Doom, but I'm going to jump over to Wolfenstein first. Wolfenstein, I feel, is a much better first-person shooter game on here, and in my top, there's probably 5 top games for this, and Wolfenstein is one of them. Doom is the one that everyone talks about, but I much prefer Wolfenstein, and Wolfenstein has music as well, which is one up over Doom. Tried to dodge the acid blood was probably the hardest thing on Alien vs Predator. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, jump on now, Gareth. The exchange rate's pretty good for US dollars at the moment, so 180 US dollars should be okay. So, new game. Die, Nazi! Die, asshole. Achtung, my ass. Toasting him. This is difficult to play, I'll be honest, with this controller, but you can even see him there. And I'm dead. But that's Wolfenstein anyway. Oh yeah, I make no mistake, Woody, I'm fully expecting that. So yeah, that is Wolfenstein anyway. Much better game, I think, than Doom. I will quickly throw on Doom just to show you. Doom is a really good game, but like I say, these controllers are just fucking horrid, and they're not the best for playing Doom on. Really, you need shoulder buttons for strafe. The 6-button controllers do actually have shoulder buttons, but by default they're not mapped to the right, because the shoulder buttons are actually mapped to buttons on the keypad on the front here, and they're mapped to the wrong buttons. So on Doom, you can't remap the buttons. So you actually have to do a bit of hard wiring in order to use the shoulder buttons to strafe. So that's not ideal. But yeah, I'll quickly fire up Doom just to show you. I mean, I'm showing you the best of the system here, obviously. And I mean, if you are going to buy a Jaguar and you can get one at the right price, it is worth buying just to play these few games, because you can't really play them quite this way anywhere else, if you know what I mean. Some of them are available elsewhere, yes, but it's curious to have this kind of strange 16, 32-bit, somewhere in between system to play them on. Got the shortest title screen in the world, by the way. It goes straight to demo in about 10 seconds. So off we go. I mean, this moves at a good pace. You don't have quite as many wall textures as you should have. So you can actually, it's easy to see where the like the hidden areas and stuff are. But die, bitch. I'm struggling to play this, by the way, is not the game itself. It's this terrible controller. Other people with better hands might have a better job than I do, but I suck. I'll just run across here. Go and grab some armour. But like I say, even at 50 Hz, this moves at a brilliant pace. You move on to 60 Hz, you get a 60 Hz switch fitted. Or if you buy an NTSC Jaguar, of course, you'll get a much faster game. This is fast enough for me, to be quite honest. Damn it, missed him. Die. And there's the exit. I managed to do one level at least. So that'll do. That's enough anyway. Yeah, the 3DO version's terrible. Great on still shots, but terrible moving. You might see a little splash screen when that comes up there. One thing about the Jaguar GD is when you first get it, you can't use it straight at the box. You actually have to scan a QR code which appears on the loading screen, which gives you an independent, a unique code. You have to then take that over to the Retro HQ site and download a custom firmware that unlocks your drive, so to speak. I understand why it's been done. I mean, I complained about a problem I'd had with the creator of the 3DO flash device a while back, because he'd intentionally done that to shit on people and put expiry dates and stuff into his software. Saint's not like that at all. He's done it just to control the system and make sure it doesn't get, you know, badly reproduced by other people, not to control the price of it. The price is intended to come down as time goes on, to be honest. But yeah, so yeah, when you first get it, you have to get a firmware file, copy it from your PC to a memory card, stick that memory card in, and then obviously when it loads, it'll automatically do the firmware update and unlock your drive. That's how you do all firmware updates, except when it loads up after that, you just press the option button, which is like the start button on the joypad, and it will go into the mode to try and load your, try and update the firmware for you. So that's how you do it anyway. I've got, for anybody who's wondering, I've got a 16GB SD card in this. 8GB would have been plenty. I heard that, I mean, if you just went with the commercial Jaguar ROMs alone, you could get away with like a sub 1GB card. But obviously, it's eventually going to support the Jaguar CD games, so you're going to need a bit more space there. And there's a lot more available to play than just the Jaguar games. And when I started expanding and building this up, I realised just what there was. So, I mean, yeah, that was a couple of dedicated Jaguar games. Some of the other games I don't really need to show you because they already look very close to how they do on the 16-bit platforms. Obviously, I've showed you there NBA Jam at the very start. That looks pretty much the same as the 16-bit platforms, just with big head mode activated. And the music isn't as good as the 16-bit platforms, unfortunately, so nothing special to show there. But what you can do, there's a lot of homebrew been made for the Jaguar over the years. Now, the Jaguar, unlike a lot of systems, it's got like a demo scene, but they've been working on homebrew games for it since it was actually an active machine, so like the mid 90s. And there were a couple of games which were released in small quantity. There's a couple of games that were released, a couple of games that were released, purely as like ROMs alone that you could inject into a skunk board, which is like the flash cart I mentioned. But there was, so there has been some quite active development. What makes them a little bit strange though is because they all utilise different chips in the Jaguar for how they perform. I think some are made to use the one certain chip, which is a familiar, like a 16-bit chip. Other games are designed to utilise all the main chips in there. The results kind of vary, if you know what I mean, and the quality varies. I mean, there's a couple of big big organisations kind of still making games for them. One of the groups is called Reboot, and anybody who mixed in Atari circles will know about Reboot. I'm not familiar with them myself, but I understand that they've made quite a lot of games, and in line with the Jag SD, the Jag GD, I keep calling it the Jag SD, along with the Jaguar GD coming out. So I think some of the guys who work for Reboot have actually helped with the development of this, and they've kindly made much of their back library of homebrew games that they were making and putting on cart originally. They've now allowed them to be packaged into one package, which you can download from Atari Age, and you can just freely download those ROMs and put them on here. And I'm going to go to a couple of those now, if we can just find a couple. Some of them are a bit more basic, some of them are a bit more advanced. One of them, we'll start with something basic, and that's Bebris, which, as you can imagine, is a Tetris clone of sorts. Some of these games may appear basic to modern eyes, but you've got to bear in mind, with the Jaguar only having a limited library, so many people creating homebrew games for it, there's got to be something to be respected, And it should load up in just a second. I'm sure I've tested most of the games on here. I've actually spent a couple of days putting the games together on this, and I had tested most of them. I thought this one I had tested. Possibly not. That's my bad. But in fact, I'm kind of going to jump the gun here a little bit on what I was going to say. Because these games have all been programmed in slightly different ways, because various dumps have been made and various releases, when it comes to downloading the ROMs you need for this, you will have to make a lot of your MRQ files if you want to see things like the screenshots and that. You'll have to make some of those yourself. But people are making packages you can download from Atari Age with those on. You can actually rename some of the titling on the screen there. Some of them are actually a little bit incorrect. I tried to go with the standard type of formatting, but I found that I think it reads off the game header or something, and if the game header has been changed, then you get weird things like this where this says Bubble Booble. Now I can't physically change that just by renaming the game. My ST ports, which I'm going to come on to next, I just got them categorized as ST. All the public domain and homebrew games, I'd put a suffix of PD on the end, because that's just how I like to categorize those games on my list. I don't have separate files. I don't like jumping between folders, because there ain't that many games. I'd rather not be jumping between lists. I'd rather have just one master list, if you know what I mean. So I took quite a while putting all these together. That was a bit of a bad example, that one that didn't work there. Maybe I just hadn't tested that one. Let's find another couple. Degs. Right, Degs, pretty sure work. This is Reboot. This is from 2012, and I know this works, so I was playing it yesterday. So if it doesn't load now, there's something amiss. And you'll have to forgive the slight strange naming. I've never understood why they use such drastically different names. At least make it sound a bit like what you're cloning when you're making some of these games, but there we go. So we've got the Reboot logo. Raptor sound. I've heard that Raptor's some kind of coding engine they use to do a lot of these games. And as you can see, it's basically a Scramble clone with some quite nifty, detailed animation and a cool soundtrack. I thought you could touch that, my mistake. Yeah, I suck. I'm much better at playing Scramble, I'll be honest. I think it's because I'm not used to the control pad, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, stay forward of the screen, you can stay ahead of it. You just don't score many points, unfortunately. Oh, that's right. The nuclear signs are your fuel on this. So that's a cool game if you like your side-scrolling shooters. Especially if you like Scramble, it is basically Scramble. Moves along at the same pace, and even the landscape graphics are very similar. So that's an example of a homebrew game. There's a couple more I just want to touch on because there's some that I really like. One of them's got a very strange name, but when I load it up, you'll instantly know what it is. So I'm gonna let you put it in comments when I do. Just got to find the game first. Oh, where is it? Where is it? Gone too far. I'll know it when I see it. I can see how it's got such a strange name. I can't actually remember it, but when I see it, I'll recognise it straight away. There it is. Kobayashi Maru Final. You would have no idea what this game would be, or even have a clue as to what it's about. But when I start it up, you'll instantly recognise what it's taking off. Yeah, nice one, Dave. Mastered inputs after inputting cheat codes on Alien vs Predator. Yeah, I mean, I think the Jaguar should be given the same treatment that the N64 was, and Retro Fighters should make a new joypad for it because it'd make the gameplay a much better experience. Whoa! No, it's not Star Trek, Simon. It's actually a game that most people have played. You'll become even more familiar when you see the guys coming down in a minute. There we go. Little guys on parachutes. 360-degree movement. Asteroids. No! Oh, you're all silly. Time Pilot. Just like Time Pilots, where you rescue the guys falling from the sky, shoot the planes. Except you can shoot their balloons off on this and catch them for more points. And once you've shot so many, you do get a mothership to attack. But the mothership actually fires back at you on this. Ah. Whoops, let him die. This is actually really fun to play. I like this one. The enemy patterns are a bit strange. Oh, there's the mothership. Graphics are nice, moves nice and smooth. It's like a more graphically advanced Time Pilot. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that game. I will be playing that a bit more. There's actually a really good port of Gorf as well, the original arcade game Gorf, as well as a Gorf 2000 version. But there was some issue over licensing, and it's very hard to get hold of that ROM now. I've been trying to find a version that works on here. None of them actually work, so that's unfortunate. So yeah, there's an example of some of the homebrew games. Some of them are really good, some of them are quite average, but those are two of the ones that I actually really enjoy. But not only that, you may remember from my Amstrad GX4000 video that they've tried to expand functionality by taking advantage of systems that were very similar to them in terms of performance. So what they've been doing for a couple of years now is they've started to port Atari ST games. Now that would make a lot of sense because obviously if it's easy enough to do and there's not much coding changing needs doing, then moving over a game that looks graphically okay and is just modified for joypad control makes a lot of sense. You just add to the library. Obviously for years the only way people have had to do that has been the skunk board, where you have to, you know, flash a game to it. It's quite a long process, and then change it out on the cartridge every time you want to change a game. Now you can just pick them from a menu. You've got a nice graphical interface, and we've got quite a few of the classics on here. So we're going to kick off with Barbarian because this is one of my favourites from that era anyway. And you'll see it performs just exactly like it did on the ST. It actually runs slightly faster. I think some of the games have been optimised a little bit, so where anywhere there where there was lag, they've improved the performance slightly. And press the right button to start the game. There we go. So you don't know what the controls are. You have to press 1 for a one-player game. Oh, and straight away I've took his fucking head off. That was always the coolest part of this game. Not a big shower of blood like there is on the other platforms, but yeah, the movie's there. And this runs at a nice pace. ST games always run a slight, I wouldn't say window, but they're not like full screen. I'm taking his head off, I don't care. Oh, nearly. Come on. Got him. Love this game, man. Barbarian 2 wasn't a patch on this. So that's one of them. And you can see that runs perfectly well. Oh, you're winding me up. Okay, fair enough. Don, one of the games you wanted to see on here, I think was R-Type, I think you mentioned. Yeah, if I go down, right down on the list, it is there. I think anyone who's wondering, I think originally there was 50 original release games. Once you add in all the homebrew that I like and the ST ports and that, you've got probably about 110, 120 games altogether. So it really does, it more than doubles the library, but, you know, using this. And of course, some of these games now, to buy the original Jaguar games, are seriously expensive. I didn't realise, because obviously now I'm selling some of my games on, how much the value are at, and I've gone just under that because I don't want to rip people off. But like Tempest is now going for £40 to £60. Doom is fetching £50 on a cart alone. I don't think I paid quite that, to be honest. But Doom is one of the games I'll be hanging on to shortly. I'll talk about that and explain why. But yeah, we'll go to R-Type just for you, Don. And this is an ST port of a very good shooter, a very hard shooter, by the way. I know you'll be a fan of this. I know this is something that Barry Morse enjoys a lot as well. And I think you can see on the title screen with this one some of the changes. It gives you a couple of options as to what you want to select for the controls. Might not be on this game, but it is on some of the other games. I think a lot of these ports have been done by Cyrano on the Atari Age forums. And you can see there the Atari Age logo, obviously, they're all representing. Nice one, Dave. How are you commenting? I haven't set this to go through YouTube. Or I didn't think I had anyway. So I don't know what's going on there. Anyway. Let's get past the loading screens. Unfortunately, you can't skip those. I think they were necessary in order to get it to boot properly. Yeah, Rayman's quite an expensive one to buy, Dave, definitely. So here we go. And, oh no, we're straight into the game. Give me my pod. Thank you very much. Oh. Actually, don't know how you shoot your pod off on this. Oh, there we go. So what's quite good is obviously on ST you would only have had, you know, one button on a joystick, whereas on this you've got multiple buttons. And if they program the port right, obviously, much like the GX4000, they've actually assigned some of the keyboard commands to buttons on your joypad. So you can actually play the game a lot easier than you could have done on the ST. So with this, for example, the B button is fire, holding that is for your super shot, but then the C button controls your pod. So it's a lot easier to control, I think. I'm not actually handling this too bad. I mean, I'll never profess to be the world's best player of side-scrolling shooters, but not too bad at R-Type here. R-Type being a notoriously difficult one. Like I say, that plays brilliantly, even with this shitty joypad, so that's a really good example there. Not a patch on the Amiga that poor. No, definitely not. Definitely not. Like I say, comparing these two Amiga games, will just every time we'll lose out. Although there might be one example there where that isn't the case, and I'm going to jump right down to it now. And if you remember, this is one of the few games that does perform better on the ST than it does on the Amiga, and it's Stunt Car Racer, which is a game I've used to demonstrate quite a few systems recently. We had this on Link Up between Amiga and ST on a Revival. I use this as an example to show the speed differences on my Spectrum Next streams, and I'm now going to show you what it's like to play this on the Jaguar. So this game has been modified obviously to run on here. You would need a keyboard for several of your interactions on here, such as where it asks you to type your name. They've thought of that, and what they seem to have done is put in a script whereby when it asks you to enter your name, it fills in player one automatically. You'll see it run across for yourself. So get into it. If I go to single player league, there you go, it automatically fills in player one for you. And I think most of the tracks are open by default on here. So you go to start the racing season, race 3 of 6, the little ramp. I think it just throws you in, throws you in randomly. But yeah, and this is a game that did run better on the ST than did on the Amiga. They unfortunately didn't alter the controls here. It would have been nice if they did. You still have to press up to accelerate on this one, and fire for your boost. But it's still not too hard to handle. And this runs just as well as it did on the ST. Runs along at a fair old pace. And like I say, it's quite good that you're getting to play games on here that you would never have been able to play on the Jaguar. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who never own the 16-bit micros, you know. And I mean, I remember the ST quite fondly because a few of my friends had them, and occasionally we would trade systems. And I know a friend of mine who had an ST, and I used to borrow his ST and play this quite a lot. So it's cool that I can now play this on a console. We don't need to set up an Atari ST to do it. So I don't know whether these are technically classed as emulation or whether they're just recoded in a Jaguar format, and I'm not quite sure how they would term it. The guys who made these could probably explain a lot better than I can, but it is cool to be able to play ST games on a console with a controller. I feel more at home with a controller, and even though it's not the ideal control system for some of the games, I'm not doing too bad at all. Yeah, it's definitely a bit smoother than the Amiga version. Runs at a hell of a pace though. No, get off the edge. Whoa. I'm gonna jump over him. Whee! Yes. Oh, that did some damage. I could play this game for hours, man. I love it. I think at the last swag meet, in fact, I was playing it for about half an hour non-stop while everyone was waiting to grab a game. Brilliant stuff. So, like I say, it's handling that at full tilt with no problems at all. I've used up all my turbo though, unfortunately. Ah well, that'll do. That's enough of that. So yeah, there's another great example. There's a couple more I just want to touch on because I enjoy them. When it loads, there we go. If there's anything on the list you want to see, guys, Woody, I think you mentioned Bionic Commando earlier. Yeah, that's also an ST port, mate. So I'll quickly fire that up for you. Dave said the hardest shooter I've played recently is Trevor McFur. Yeah, that's a very difficult game on here. I'll be honest. I've not played it much myself, but on trying it out, I was like, oh my god. I mean, I'm actually, contrary to what I said in the first part of this video, I'm actually painting the system in pretty good light here. It's not the worst system in the world. It was just sadly under-catered for. You know, in the right hands, the right developers, it could have done so much more. But if there's no financial incentive, then you know, manufacturers they just aren't gonna do it, are they? You know, they're not gonna make games that ain't gonna sell. So it's great that the homebrew community are doing things like this, you know. I always found this game strangely cutesy for the topic, you know what I mean? Hey! Hey! Yeah, I'm well dead. Not quite sure why I went down. I should have gone up and over, but there you go. So yeah, that's Bionic Commando, mate. Never a game I played too much. Not on the NES, where it was. I think it was most popular on the NES. Yeah, the scrolling's not fantastic, unfortunately, on that game. I'm trying to see if there's any more which show it in a better light. Beast Bus is actually a pretty good shooter on this. And when you do load this game, you actually get an option. You can plug in. I'm not sure what mouse you can use, but there's one mouse you can use with a Jaguar. And if you use it with this, you can play Beast Busters and shooting games with a mouse, which is quite good. Buggy Boy, that wasn't my favourite port on here. Bubble Bobble's actually a pretty good port. One strange thing though, I don't know whether the Atari ST original was like that, but the game plays and there's only music. There's no sound effects. I don't know if it's a factor of it being ported over, whether they could only get music or sound effects, or whether the ST original was like that. But yeah, the game only plays with music. There's no sound effects at all, which is a pretty good portable wobble. EA have some games lined up for the Jag. Yeah, I think they might have done actually, Dave. I'm not that familiar with the library. There's people out there who probably tell you more. People are a lot more educated than certain people who think they're the authority on the system. But this is Bubble Bobble anyway. Obviously, this shouldn't be a stretch for any system to play. This game was ported to the 8-bits originally perfectly well. And if they couldn't manage sound effects and music, I don't know why. The fucking NES could do it, and that was an 8-bit. Boop. Again, with this, you can use up to jump, but they've actually programmed C to be jump as well, and then B to fire your bubbles. The music's been redone. It's not the ST music. Sounds like the Amiga music. I think they actually they do call it Bubble Bobble Arcade. I think they have actually taken samples maybe from the arcade, and maybe that's why you haven't got sound effects, because of the way they've done the music. I don't know. Still, it's a nice port to play. A little bit slower than the original game, but still pretty cool. A couple of games I did want to show, which I actually really enjoy. A lot of people out there who are arcade fans, they loved they love the Star Wars arcade game. Now, the Star Wars arcade game, the original one, is a very, very fond memory for a lot of people. What I didn't realise, obviously there was Return of the Jedi, which was like an isometric type of game where you had the land speeders and I think there was some kind of Millennium Falcon assault in there. I didn't actually realise there was an Empire Strikes Back. Well, there were Empire Strikes Back games on many home consoles and computers, but they were very, very different games to the original Star Wars arcade. On this, you've actually got the ST port of the Star Wars arcade, which is a good port, by the way. But I didn't realise they did like a wireframe version of Empire Strikes Back as well. And I was playing this the other day, and it plays very, very similar. Obviously, except having like the Death Star assault, you take on the AT-AT walkers, you take on the the Imperial scout droids, and shoot them with speeder lasers. Pretty cool. So there you go. You can see at the side there, you got a choice as to what you want to use. You can use an ST mouse, Amiga mouse, or a Jaguar joypad. So I'm not quite sure how you connect those. I don't think they use the same port. I'll go to easy because I suck. But I'd never seen this before. I wasn't even aware of its existence. But obviously you can see there, that was the Imperial Scout droids. Same principle, same wireframe graphics. You're just using speeder lasers instead. And obviously you'd have to wrap up the ATATs on the second stage. Here we go, look. I brought that one down anyway. There you go, so that's my tower rope there, flying around. I missed, unfortunately. Flying straight at it here, not good. Need to come around and make a pass, I think. There we go. See if we can get his legs this time. Will that count? Yes, it counts. Get this one. Come on. Yes, down it goes. And then, of course, now you're attacking the TIE fighters, much like the original arcade game. Get my ass kicked, mine, because I can't control it very well. This would probably play better with a mouse. Well, much better with a mouse, I would imagine. But it's not too bad with the joypad, to be honest. Moves are a fair old pace, anyway. I'd never seen it before either, Woody, so I'm kind of glad that they've ported it. Now, Don actually asked me, he said, do people, can you just play any ST game on here? Unlike the Amstrad GX4000, where you pretty much can convert any old game, no, you have to do a bit of a messing around. You need someone who can code to be able to port the games, but there is a request thread. If you go to Atari Age, there's a lot of people requesting certain games to be ported over to ST. Probably now more so in light of the Jaguar GD being released, because obviously people have now got a much easier way to play a lot more games on the Jaguar. So if you go over to Atari Age is key to owning this EverDrive type device, because they're the ones managing it. They're the ones creating, they're creating the homebrew games. They're creating commercial releases, which they are now starting to sell in ROM form in case you want to put them on your own GD. Rather than just as pre-made cartridges. Obviously, they're still porting the ST games. If you put a request in, or you know a bit of code yourself, you can probably quite easily port over your own games. The one thing I haven't touched on just yet is betas and demos. Obviously, like I said, though, there is a bit of a demo scene for the Jaguar, which is where a lot of the homebrew games and stuff come from. But you can play other games using this. You've got Alien vs Predator Alpha there. You've got a couple of. There's a good demo on here I'm going to show actually, and this is about the only real way you can play it, because it's 14 megabytes, which is way too big to be used on anything like the Skunk board and things like that. There's a few demos on here. One thing I have found though is, unlike some other EverDrives where you can just download a ROM and have it work, even though Saint has added quite a few supported extensions like .rom, .jag, .j64. There's a couple of other I can't think of off the top of my head. Even though it does support a lot of those extensions, if they haven't been coded quite right, they may not run immediately. Best thing to do, I mean, I'm kind of in the second phase of this game drive. The first test devices went out back end of last year, which is how they kind of came to the first production firmware, which is what you're seeing here. I'm probably in like the first, second-ish batch of people getting theirs on pre-order. There's going to be a lot of things ironed out, but because people are only just owning them now, people are only just getting to kind of get to grips with it, tell them what the problems are, tell them what they think of things, and obviously put in requests for new features and things like that. The one thing I hoped would be ready by now would be the Jaguar CD support, but I've been assured it is coming. It does work, he has got it working, but he wants it like properly stable, and he wants to sort out a tool for converting obviously your CD images to the proprietary format to get them to work on here. I don't see that being a problem going forward, because there's a lot of Jaguar CD homebrew, and I imagine people over at Atari Age will work with Saint on making everything fully compatible there. So I think that'll be fine for the future. But at the moment, not a lot of these demos run, which is a shame, because there's a few important ones here. One of the games I mentioned was Fight for Life. Now, Fight for Life, there's a story around Fight for Life. The game was made by one developer, I think it was, and the game was, he wasn't paid. He's supposed to be getting paid regularly for his work on the game, and he didn't. He basically wasn't getting paid, and he told Atari, "If you don't pay up, I'm not going to finish the game." But he was under contract, so he finished it. Sent him the shitty game, thinking they wouldn't release it, like a bad version of it. They released it anyway and didn't pay him. But then many years later, it turned out that he did make a finished version of it, which was a lot better than the production version that they put out there. And he held it back intentionally. And one of these two here is the final production version. It's supposed to be a lot smoother, control a lot better. But neither of these ROMs that I've got here work, unfortunately. So I need to hunt around and see if I can get a patch for that. But there's other demos on here. I'll try and load just one just to see if it does load, but most of the ones on here don't load properly. I think they're working on improving support for those. But obviously there's going to be a lot of demos because of the demo scene around the Jaguar. We'll try the JagFest demo from 2001. That was quite a popular event. But already it's saying unknown file format. Even though it's a .jag extension, it's giving me a couple of options to play it because it doesn't recognise the JAG file format, which it should do. And it gives you a couple of options here how to run it. But I've found that with most of these, it doesn't matter which one you pick, neither one loads. It just goes to a black screen or goes to the red screen of death. So, see if this is doing anything. It doesn't look like it's doing anything. No, I don't think it is. So yeah, still a little bit of a way to go in terms of those. I'm not too fussed about that because a lot of that stuff doesn't really interest me too much. It's nice to see when people do cool things with it, but it's not something I would buy an EverDrive for, nor would it be something I'd spend anything more than a passing glance at, if you know what I mean. One I will show you which does work, which has been released to coincide with the GD-ROM, is this demo. And I think Dave Rowland actually shouted up Bad Apple. I'll quickly show that because this is quite impressive. Cleverly done. I mean, it's basically just a video. Well, I say a video, a load of still screens made to look like a full motion video and obviously fitting into a small amount of space. But it is 14 megabit, which is a lot bigger than most carts. I think the biggest cart on here is 4 megabits. So at 14 megabit, it's massive. And we'll just fire this up. See, it takes a little bit longer to load into memory than some of the others do. I think a lot like a lot of the other EverDrives, it actually it takes the ROM from a file and flashes it to a chip on the actual cartridge itself, and that's why there's always a little load time involved because it erases what's been stored on there and then puts it back on. One thing this doesn't do that I wished it did do, and I will put it as a feature request, is that with a lot of EverDrives, if once you've flashed a ROM to the drive, you can't just turn the console off and back on and just press start to jump straight into it. You have to reload the ROM every time. There should be a way to skip that. So here we go. So this has been done by Lawrence Stavely. That's a name I've heard come up a few times. It's a name I've heard bashed a little bit by one person in particular, and I'm not going to go into that right now. But it seems to be an okay guy if you can do cool stuff like this. I can have a refreshing drink while this is on. I've got such a dry mouth here. I haven't actually got a beer available like I usually have. You can turn the lyrics on and off during playback. Press the B button there. So pretty cool stuff there, as you can see. Right. So yeah, I mean that's covered the Jaguar pretty much as I wanted to cover it. The only other thing I've not been able to do in this video, unfortunately, is I really wanted to show off the Jaguar being linked up, but with us being in lockdown, I can't really do that just yet. As soon as we do get out of it, Aaron does have a working Jaguar with Doom, and I've got a working Jaguar with Doom. We've now got a couple of 6-button pads. We've now got the link cable. I'm going to try and get that running. Hopefully get it running at a future event as well if you want to try and play Jaguar on Link Up. Sorry, Doom on Link Up on Jaguar for a change. But one thing I will mention is that at the moment, the Jaguar GD, because of the way it uses the start operation, it doesn't support the JagLink. So if you were trying to play things like Air Cars or Doom or something like that, obviously some of these games are going to cost you a lot more than some of the other games. So if you're going to buy the original, it's going to cost a few quid. The Jaguar GD would have been the ideal way to do it, but at the moment it doesn't support the JagLink. Even if you've got, I think there's a Jaguar development system which has got the JagLink built into it. It doesn't support it out of the box, so you can't play Link games. So the only way you can play Doom Link at the moment is by having the original cartridge. Now, I put some games up for sale, and people were asking why I hadn't put Doom up for sale just yet. Two reasons. One thing being, Doom is a strange game that apparently actually divided certain Atari Jaguars, because apparently there were some Jaguars that would play Doom flawlessly and some Jaguars that wouldn't play Doom flawlessly. Now, the one I had where the cartridge slot broke was actually one of those that doesn't play Doom flawlessly. And what would happen is every couple of levels it would crash with an unknown exception code. And when I read into it, it turned out that back in the day, because Doom was an unusual cart that used some strange memory mapping, because the Atari Jaguars were made so badly, some of the crap components, when they would start to fail, would cause the game to crash because it was doing things that the console wouldn't normally do. And what Atari would do would allow you to send your console back, and they would send you a new console which would allow it to work. And it seems like the console I was using, the one that I actually eventually broke the cartridge slot on, is one of those that won't play Doom properly. So I'm going to be sending Doom off with that console when it gets repaired to see if you can diagnose what the problem was that stopped Doom from working properly. Plus, I'll be hanging on to the Doom cart anyway, just to test the link system with two properly working Jaguars that work with Doom, because obviously I can't use my GD-ROM for that. So I'll be hanging on to Doom just for now, but the other games obviously are all up for sale. Yeah, so the Atari Jaguar itself, I mean, I've got mixed feelings towards it. I didn't particularly want one back in the day. It didn't do anything better than any of the other systems at the time. There was a reason it was a flop, and there's a reason it buried Atari. And you know, there's so many mistakes they made. Like I say, it's not particularly well built. You know, the console itself it looks pretty cool as a design, but how well that translates to a playable system, you know, is questionable. It's very plasticky, hasn't got a reset button, no dust cover on the cart slot. That can't be good in the long run. No dust covers on the rear either, where the ports are. So that's just a place for crap to get in. The actual cartridge ports, you can actually see the exposed metal of the shielding behind them. That's not a good design for, you know, what was supposed to be a cutting edge console. The controllers we've already discussed were hideous, and yet you've got some good games on here that are quite fun to play, and some exclusives that you really should play. Some games, the best versions of them: Alien vs Predator, brilliant. Doom, Wolfenstein, both brilliant. Tempest 2000, worth owning the console for just to play that game alone. And yet I can't really endorse it for casuals because I don't know if there's enough content there. However, throw in the Jaguar GD drive, which is amazing, by the way. I'm just going to pop that out so you can see it properly. So, the Jaguar GD drive, you know, pick up one of these things. As expensive as it is, I mean, it is very well built. It's this really hardware in case. I'm not sure how they make it. I think it's not injection molded. It's like a really hard kind of composite material, and it's so well built, so well screwed together. It doesn't flex. It's rock hard. You know, it's going to last a long time. It's got a nice printed label. It's got indicator LEDs The SD card slot is perfectly cut for it. You can see there, it's properly precision done. It's not like on the squiff or doesn't damage your card going in. And something they've done, which I will mention actually, because of the specific problem I had with my Jaguar, you might not be able to tell on video, but the reason the pins get bent so easily in a Jaguar cartridge slot is because the pitch is so close together, because the pins are so small. If you've got a card edge on your cartridge that is too thick, it will actually, or it hasn't been worn in a little bit, the width of that cart edge there will actually crush the pins as you insert it. Not a great design, but on the Jaguar GD, what they've actually done is they've pre-beveled the edge, and you can't tell on here, but the edge of the cartridge here, the cart edge there is actually almost sharp. They've created like a 45-degree bevel, so when it's inserted into the cartridge slot, it properly separates the slot and goes between the pins without bending them. You can see there the amount of pins are inside the edge of here, and you can see why it's so hard to replace the cartridge slot on these things. I mean, Mark Payne's going to have a go, but I do feel comfortable using this in this console because it's been properly constructed. If they'd have done it cheap, I mean, I've had some EverDrives for other systems where they've been built using, slightly too wide card edges, and they're a bit tight in the slot, or the actual plastic flexes too much and it's not a perfect fit. If you had something like that for this, you'd probably damage quite a few Jaguars by doing it. This feels nice and solid, and when you put it in, I mean, I'm still always careful because I've had bad experiences, but it feels pretty solid when it goes in. So like I say, yeah, the Jaguar, not the hottest system if you're not a fan. You've got no reason to get one. If you are curious and you can get one at the right price, try and pick up something unboxed maybe. Look to pay about the 150 mark. You could be onto a good thing. Grab one of these and you'll never need to buy the CD system either. And you'll be able to play a lot more games than you ever would be able to with just the system alone. You'll also be able to play the CD games eventually, so that will be really cool. And if you haven't got an ST or something like that, you obviously now you can play a lot of the key ST games on here. There are a lot I didn't cover. I think I've got Gauntlet 2 on there. What else was on there? There's loads of games. There's Rampage, Badlands, Super Sprint. A lot of brilliant arcade games there. But yeah, it's worth giving it a try. And so if you do want one of these, go to Atari Age. They're $180 at the moment, which I think you have to pre-book and agree to pay. And then what they will do is when your order is ready in the order, like the production order list, they will actually call the money in from your PayPal account. They won't just take it without instruction. They'll tell you that it's going to come, but you have to kind of agree to that beforehand, so they can put you on the waiting list, if you know what I mean. The waiting list won't be a year like it is now, but there are a lot of people ordering these now, and on the strength of videos being made, a lot more people starting to order them. So make sure if you do want one, don't delay. Get yourself on there now. You won't have to part with the money for quite some time, so just get on there, place an order, check out the Atari Age forums for the support for this system, and you'll be able to follow any of the progress. You'll get to see if and when the Jaguar CD support comes. You'll get to see if any more ST ports come along, and you'll get to see if any of the more homebrew organisations make any new games for it. There's a few in development I'm aware of, and if you like your demos and stuff, they'll hopefully get most of those working. But yeah, so that was the Atari Jaguar and the Jaguar GD. I'm sorry it broke into two parts again, guys. If you've got any questions, you can now leave them on the video afterwards. I'm going to try and splice these together and re-upload this to YouTube, so at least it's in one place again. But I hope that's answered some of your questions. A lot of people were keen to see it. So the Atari Jaguar for the next Room 101 episode. I think that'll be a topic for another day, mate. For now, I'm just covering what I know of the system and the way I'm experiencing it. I will give it a bit more play and try things out in a bit more detail, but yeah, that's my experiences with it. And as for the Jaguar GD, I can highly recommend it if you have got a Jaguar. With the price that Jaguar games are going for now, it doesn't make any sense not to buy one. Do you know what I mean? Even if you're a big collector, the prices are going crazy. You're starting to walk into Neo Geo cartridge territory with the way the price on these systems and the games are going. So if you do want to get into this system and you want to get into it in an accessible way, get a Jaguar game drive, and you'll just unlock everything the system's got to offer. But for now, guys, I'm going to sign off and enjoy the rest.